That we had earlier of the two cousins killed in Diepsloot, and to help us understand the mindset of the perpetrators of this crime, we joined in studio by Dr. Amelia Kleijn. Dr. Kleijn did a PhD on incarcerated men who sexually violated children under 3 years old. Dr. Kleijn, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Firstly, tell us, and I'm very interested to know about your PhD that you've done on men who sexually perpetrate on children lower than 3 years old.
That is correct. I spent 3 years in maximum security prisons across South Africa, interviewing 10 men who had received very long sentences for the rape of children under the age of 3 years. I conducted the study to try and understand what had gone so wrong in their lives that the only way that they could react was by raping particularly young children.
Now, briefly tell us about their mindset. What goes through their minds?
They come from backgrounds with incredible maltreatment on every single level possible. The point that I want to make is that by understanding does not mean to say that we condone, that we forgive. It's my experience that when you talk about this topic, understandably there's a very high level of emotion. So it's important that we make that distinction. Understanding and showing empathy in no way excuses the behavior. These acts are about revenge. They're about revenge against the world. Often revenge towards men and women who the respondents felt had slighted them in some way. Some of these men were involved with these women sexually. Others desired to be involved with them sexually. Others had fight with other men just before they committed these crimes. These crimes are not premeditated. They are completely opportunistic. And what happens is a child will be left with inappropriate supervision, and the man then pounces on that child.
But this is a vulnerable child, 3 years old. What does he see within this child? There can't be any sexual innuendo, I would imagine.
You're absolutely correct. These acts have nothing to do with sexual gratification. And in fact, one of the men told me that before he was able to penetrate the child, he had to give himself a little help, shall we say, in order to do so. But there are acts of absolute rage, absolute anger and revenge, which manifests itself in a sexual way.
When you met with these perpetrators or these men, did they look scary or intimidating in any way?
No, not at all. And I can remember the first respondent I met, I was actually disappointed because the media so often reports sexual abusers as monsters. And I don't know about you, but when I think of a monster, I think of someone, you know, who's got green slime and long funny fingers. These men look perfectly normal. And the key here, as we've seen in this Diepsloot situation, these men come from communities. They're not in strange places. They live amongst us, and they are products of our society. And when they speak to you, there is nothing untoward in their behavior when they tell you about these crimes. What was very, very noticeable was the extraordinary lack of empathy that all these men showed. For example, when I put the question to one of the men, you know, was he not afraid that he might suffocate this child, given his size versus the size of the 13-month-old he had raped? He just giggled and said to me, "I don't know, lady." When someone is that blunted, we associate that as one of the features of something called antisocial personality behavior or a psychopath. And that is the key marker of a psychopath. There is no empathy for the victim.
As an ordinary member of society, would I be able to identify my neighbor or this person, this perpetrator, that would inflict this type of injury onto my child?
I think you could, in the sense that these men had backgrounds that are not uncommon to many men in South Africa and other parts of the world, whereby they were subjected to frequent and severe corporal punishment. I'm talking beatings with shambox until they're black and blue. These were most often administered by their mothers. They were beaten in schools. They were beaten by members of their communities. There was completely insufficient, inadequate parental supervision. Many of these men had been abandoned by their fathers. For those men whose fathers were in their lives, it was like their fathers were not there. They were completely detached from their children. And those kinds of factors, when children are associated with violence and all their role models are very violent, be it a parent, an older relative, a teacher, community members, it is highly likely that that child is going to grow up and exhibit very, very violent adult behaviors, including things like beating intimate partners.
Now, we cannot condone this type of behavior, but these people need help and assistance. Can the correctional services help them?
I think they can, but they need very, very skilled intervention. My issue, however, is actually at the prevention level. By the time these children are hurt, it's too late. They're two dead little girls and other children who have been abused in the foulest manner possible. And to me, as a society, we don't only have to be looking at what's happening now, we have to be looking at what we can do to prevent these. And one of these ways is by not hitting children. It's that simple. Because we know that whilst beating a child may stop problematic behavior in the short term, it's the long-term consequences that are far, far more serious. And that includes violent behaviors during teenage and adult lives.
Dr. Amelia Kleijn, thank you so much for joining us in studio. Very illuminating.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Amelia Kleijn from Wits University.
I'm in private practice.
In private
I'm a
practice.
social worker.
And of course a PhD on incarcerated men who sexually violated children.